My name is Jason Graun. I'm a SC director for Fortinet for our EDR team. And for those who don't know what EDR stands for, it's Endpoint Detection and Response. So we're going to talk about what's going on. I think everyone in this room has probably heard about ransomware and malware, maybe recently. Obviously, there's been some scary things in the last year or so. But we'll be detonating some ransomware. I know this slide deck is different than what the actual presentation is, but we're going to talk about ransomware, malware, and cyber crooks. So some scary stuff out there, but there's ways to prevent that. There's tools out there. There's some good hygiene we can do. I heard some of the presentations earlier. Some of it's just basic, good cybersecurity hygiene. But let's get into some details on ransomware and what we're trying to solve. So lack of visibility is one of the big problems that we're trying to solve. So one of the things that we've seen, and the customers that I'm talking to, and I run the whole country for Fortinet, so I see customers East Coast to West Coast, and lack of visibility. And I think the pandemic really showed this as an issue because all of a sudden you had millions of people who were probably in the office mostly, now 100% at home. And all of a sudden, a lot of the tools that IT organizations relied on were no longer available because you don't have next-gen firewalls sitting in everyone's home. You don't have all these tools in millions and thousands of people's homes. So how do we solve that problem? Threat landscape. I think everyone here may have actually been affected. I live in Arizona, so I wasn't affected by this, but Colonial Pipeline probably affected I think the southeastern United States about a year ago now, affected everybody. So that's another scary one, right? We saw where the dark side ransomware, which we've run into before other places, Fortinet has with our incident response team, brought down the Colonial Pipeline, right? I was nervous what was going to happen long term to gas prices and just the overall OT environment. Thankfully, Colonial Pipeline, I think, was back up in about 5 days, if I remember it correctly, but that was a scary one. And for those who can't see that slide, if it's an eye chart, that's a 700% increase in ransomware from December to July of 2020. So that doesn't even take into consideration like the JBS, the meatpacking plant that got hit a few months after the Colonial Pipeline. It does not even take into consideration the Colonial Pipeline. And of course, anyone who's following the situation in Ukraine, right, there's now Ukrainian-focused, the Russian government denied it, but they're Ukrainian-focused malware that is designed to get in the machine. Oh, your version of Windows is in the Ukrainian language? Wipes the entire drive. Doesn't seem to affect English laptops. Or German laptops or Spanish laptops, but for some reason it's affecting those. So another thing that's very, very targeted, right? It's a nation state attack, but that threat landscape is getting bigger and bigger. And the other one we're looking to solve is skills shortages. I think this is huge. I think everybody feels the pain. The last number I saw, there was going to be close to 3 million, this is a global number, 3 million unfilled cybersecurity threat analysts globally. That's a whole lot of people, right? And yes, you can't, be a cybersecurity analyst overnight, but there is plenty of work to be done, plenty of opportunity out there. But that also means if we can't find the human power to look at these things, to analyze these logs, to take corrective action, how do we solve that problem, right? And usually the answer is automation. So, ransomware. Anybody in here have anxiety? And you can either raise your hand or just head nod. Anybody have anxiety about ransomware? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think most people do, right? Is my data protected? One of the things that I do also, not as my everyday job, but when we have our incident response team gets involved, there are times where customers who don't have necessarily either any of our products, and again, no product's ever 100%, but they don't have an EDR solution at all. They will get crypto locked, right? They'll get ransomware crypto locked. And at that point, hopefully, they've done some really good snapshots of their data, snapshots of their VM, in their storage infrastructure, whether that's, NetApp, filers, EMC stuff, or even in the cloud. But a lot of times when the machines get crypto locked or data gets crypto locked, an incident response person that's going to help you with that, their first question may be not what kind of firewall do you have, what's your EDR. One of their first questions may be what has been your snapshot policy on your data, because if your snapshot policy's taking snapshots often, you can sometimes roll back to that, right? So that's always a good thing. And I'm by no means a snapshot data expert, but that's also one of the things that I think we're seeing a lot more cybersecurity people take into consideration is, hey, let's pull the data team and the storage team into this, because if we haven't done snapshots in 6 months, then you revert to a snapshot from 6 months ago. Well, that data is nearly useless, right? You've lost a whole bunch of stuff. So looking at your snapshots is usually the safest thing that you can do that's sort of not putting up defensive measures. It's just good IT hygiene. And that's the difference between some of the numbers that we see here. And so all this comes from, again, it's probably an eye chart, but down there is the data. It's from the Verizon 2020 data breach report. So that's the average is 16 days. So that's, basically 2 full weeks, a little more than that. That's a long time, right? I mean, it's basically, 16, let's call it 16 business days. But obviously when incident responses happen, people are working around the clock. So it's amazing because that takes into consideration numbers like Colonial Pipeline was back in about 5 days. And then there's customers who 2 months later, they're still dealing with it. So that's the average. So obviously there are some organizations doing better and there's some organizations doing worse. Of course, the cost of downtime is always an issue. And then, what are they trying to do? It's usually data exfiltration of some sort. So, if you've never seen a screen, you can Google this, you can search on it. There's plenty of screenshots of what ransomware looks like when it's crypto locked your machine. Usually it'll be some sort of splash page that sometimes they'll just change the background of the machine and say, you've been, crypto locked by the dark side ransomware. They're actually very nice. They actually usually put a text file on the machine and they go, here is the onion, the Tor address on the dark web where you can give us some Bitcoin and we'll give you the password for your files. I mean, it's amazing how sophisticated some of these attackers are, because it's not just like, I crypto locked you and I'm a 15-year-old kid. It's like, oh no, would you like to call our help desk and they'll help you. They literally have help organizations. These cyber organizations have help desks that if you don't understand how to get in the Tor network, they'll walk you through the Tor network, how to get on. Like, if you've been in sales, there's one of the sales pitches is make it easy for your customer to give you money. This is cyber criminals making it easier for their victims to give ransom. Now, I don't recommend it. If you cannot do it, don't do it, because it just emboldens them. But there are cyber crooks out there that are literally that good. Well, they will walk you through. Oh yeah, here you go. Here's the browser on download Brave, the Brave browser, or plug in for Firefox, and go here, and then here's how you get crypto. I mean, it's amazing that they actually have help organizations to help you with that. That's how sort of emboldened and sort of almost arrogant some of these guys are. But that's the world we live in, right? And so usually what they'll do is they'll grab, and I've seen this with my own eyes during some of our incident responses. They'll grab maybe a picture from like your HR system. So maybe they'll have a picture of my passport, because usually as an employee you have to show proof of U.S. citizenship. And there'll be a picture somewhere in an organization of your passport. And they'll go, hey, here's just a little snapshot, a little taste of the data that we have, or the data that we've encrypted. And they'll just go, here you go. Here's Jason's passport. Here's all his information. Here's the passport number. That's what we have. And you're like, awesome. Great. What do I do, right? That's usually a terrifying thing for most CISOs, VPs, and even even engineers, that's never a good day because you clearly have data that's out in the wild. Now, they may not have pulled everything, but sometimes they will. I have seen where they've taken 20, 50, 100 gig worth of data and pulled that out. So you go, well, how did they get that much data without anybody noticing? And that's a very good question. How did they get that much data without anybody noticing? If you remember years and years ago, there was the infamous Sony attack where, North Korean hackers allegedly were the ones that pulled entire gigs, huge files of Blu-ray movies. And to my non-techie friends and families, they're like, well, I don't understand what 100 gig is. What is that? And I'm like, imagine you're sitting down and you're watching Netflix in your house and somebody walks in the door, picks up your fridge, and then walks out and you have no idea that it just happened. And I'm like, that's what happened to Sony. So again, cybersecurity is, it's a multitude of things. It's, hey, why did it all of a sudden we have this massive spike in internet traffic leaving our network? That's an indicator of compromise. It may be legit, but why did 100 gigs just leave? Why did 200 gigs just leave, or whatever the amount of data is? So looking at the edge of your network, whether that's on-prem, looking at those things, that's always a bad day. And then, of course, the last little sort of, is it going to show up over here? Yep, cool. The last little thing they drop is the destructive payload, right? Usually, most times, unless it's some sort of nation-state actor, like the wiper thing that's happening right now in Ukraine, or Stuxnet several years ago that destroyed the Natanz nuclear facility in Iran. They're going to crypto lock your machine. I mean, it's not very sophisticated. It's literally just extortion. So, not to be the naysayer and the sky is falling, but that's the world we live in. So the question now is, how do we solve that problem? What do we do? So if we look kind of in the red down here, sort of this area is kind of where we've always been for the last few years, where you've got first generation EDR solutions out there that would say, hey, you had something bad happen, and here's all the data. And I'm like, cool, you told me about it. Did you get in front of him? I was a defensive lineman. Like, did you put a shoulder on the guy? Did you hit him? Did you try to block him? And they're like, no, but here's all the data. And you're like, well, that's great, but you didn't stop the run, right? To use a football term, you didn't stop the attack. It's great to know that it happened, but if I'm paying a security guard, I'd like you to stand in front of that punch and take that punch from me. So, again, these are some of the things that we've tried to do. The problem is, and this is what I think, depending on your level of understanding and how much you've really looked at what these cyber criminals are doing, there is some very targeted attacks out there, but a lot of these cyber, like Colonial Pipeline, like the Equifax hack several years ago, they're all from automated scripts. They're automated scripts that are just combing the internet, looking for ports, running Python scripts to then go, oh, this port's open. Let me go see if they have this vulnerability in Apache or whatever the attack vector is that the script's looking for. And as soon as they sort of, like a fish on a hook, as soon as you feel that fish pull, those scripts now are going to deploy the payload, deploy the attack. So all the weapons, if you will, all the cyber weapons and these things that criminals are using are completely automated, right? It's not like some of the Hollywood or the media implication of, hey, it's a 15-year-old in mom's basement. Yeah, that still happens, but they're much more sophisticated now, just blanketing the entire internet looking for victims. And then, so if our attacks are coming at us in an automated way, our defenses must be automated. Because if we're waiting, some people out there are waiting an hour to do remediation. Well, here's a math problem for the math nerds. The latest ransomware can encrypt a 512 hard drive in about 57 seconds, give or take. If I wait 1 hour, how many hard drives how many 512 gig hard drives can I encrypt in 1 hour if it takes 57 seconds to encrypt one? And the answer is not linear. The answer is exponential, because usually, especially in the sort of like the remote work, before the remote worker days, if you have a bunch of machines on your network it infects Jason's machine, and then Andy's machine, and then Bill's machine, and it just goes bam, exponentially, so it spreads. So ironically, working from home helps us a little bit just because we don't necessarily have a bunch of corporate machines connected together, but we still have the issue of users are now sort of in the wild, wild west. They may not have the same security controls they once had in the office. So what we want to do is automate those things. So we want to automate the process. So that's kind of up here in the blue, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate here in a minute. Is, constantly looking for attacks, always looking for those things. So yeah, give me all the data you can give me all the details. So if I have to bring in a forensic person, I can. But also, please, be my security, my bodyguard, and take that punch, right? Take that shot for me, because that's the point of really any solid, EDR service out there is to let's stop that attack as it happens. Let's remediate the attack. So in the demo, there's really two components to specifically, most EDR solutions have this, specifically the FortiEDR solution, is one, you have what we call pre-infection prevention. So that's sort of your next-gen AV. We're scanning files. We're looking for known things, known vulnerabilities. All based on, not based on signatures, but machine learning, AI techniques, algorithms is what it's looking at. Now, those are great because if it's known, if you've seen it before, if it has a behavior, we can catch it. However, the scary stuff is like the log4j that just happened on Apache. That's a 0 day, right? Or it was a 0 day. There are 0 days out there right now that we don't know about. So the question becomes is, how do you detect 0 days? Because that's really the scary part, right? If signature-based methods worked, John McAfee, as crazy as he was, might still be with us, and his company would be amazing, right? The signature-based technology would still be here. And signatures have their place, but like all things, right, it's sort of like an arms race. If we have 0 days, signatures won't work because the very nature of a 0 day is no signature. So we call that post-infection prevention, and I'm going to show that. I'm actually going to purposely, click on ransomware, and we'll watch what happens. And so we'll kind of go through what the product does, how it looks, kind of what it was doing to the machine, and how do we automate this at scale. So I'm literally going to, for lack of a better term, try to blow my foot off. So let's see if I've not gotten logged out. Nope, I did. I'm a professional. Please do not try this at home. Isn't that what the David Copperfield always says? So this is a VMware environment sitting in a lab. So what I'm going to do is just a few things. This is an actual Windows 10 patched machine. We can see the host name. I'm an engineer by heart. I'm not a marketing person. So it's called SE Malware Demo because that's what it does. It's where I detonate malware. So I have a folder here that's got a bunch of different malware in it. There were actually some that were even focused on Tesla customers. And so you're like, hey, I got my Powerwall. I got my new cool Tesla thing. Yeah, here's the update. Click, game over, right? So that's why Tesla crypt. So those are some other ones that I've run. The one that I like to run for this is a thing called Cerberus. And Cerberus is a fairly well-known ransomware. It's been around a while. But it does a few unique things. It has some dynamic code in there, so it helps kind of hide itself. I also change the hash after I run it every single time, so meaning the signature of it. So if I took that hash and put it in VirusTotal would go, I don't know what it is, because VirusTotal has never seen that hash. So that's where if you're relying on something that's hash-based, signature-based, you can very, very easily change the hash. And then there's tools to do it, or you can just type echo command and then just add junk to the end of your executable, and now the hash is changed, and a signature-based antivirus will go, looks good to me, and now you're crypto locked. It'll let it straight through. So I am going to purposely click this, and what we're going to see Well, while we wait, actually, I didn't click it yet, but down here is the, hopefully can everyone see that? Okay, I mean, I know we got two screens, which is good, so I'm seeing some head nods. I don't know which one to be easier. So down here's, nothing super duper fancy. System tray icon, right? It says 40 EDRs in protection mode. That's where our system tray is. So the end user, who might be a CPA, might be an attorney, may not be a technical person at all, they get a little bit of an indicator of what's going on. So I'm going to purposely click on that. So what's happening is EDR is actually looking at what the executable is doing. So the executable is actually running right now, and we're inspecting it live on this VM. And so what we see here is it says, hey, this process has been blocked. So this would be the experience of the user. So now the user goes, oh, I clicked on something, and this Fortinet thing said, contact your system admin. We can customize that message. And so if I'm a user, hopefully, we say, call the help desk, call Jason at the help desk, call this number. What also happened, for those that saw it, is I had Cerberus right here above Crypto Wall, which is another crypto, another ransomware I have. That file is now gone. Cerberus got deleted. So that all happened with exactly zero human interaction other than me purposefully going, oh, this is the new cool thing that my friend sent me, and I double clicked on it. So this scenario is very real world. I mean, when you're talking about 0 days, email security, great at catching spam. Email security will usually catch known things. 0 days, not so much. Firewalls, not going to catch anything that's a 0 day. So let's go look and see what actually happened. So I'm actually going to disconnect from the VPN. Of course. There we are. So this is the actual console. So this is where the user, the administrator, I should say, the user doesn't, ever log into a console, the end user, but the security teams, the IT teams would log into the console, and the internet might be a little bit slow here right now, but let's see. There we go. So this is where I get all kinds of information. There's a lot of, and again, this is a demo environment, so myself, the other members of my team, some of our threat research team are purposefully, for lack of a better term, pulling the trigger on ransomware and malware in these environments on purpose. So we see a number of things. So I get an idea of what's going on in my environment. So I see, all the malicious things that have happened, things that are suspicious. I also get sort of the top talkers or the top victims, if you will. This guy down here, this poor Neptune VM, it wasn't mine, it was somebody else's on my team, has had 231 incidences. So again, demo machines, right, we're purposefully detonating different ransomware. I hope in no actual customer environment that we would see this much of this bad, but we've seen some rough stuff when we've done proof of concepts in there. So we also show you some of the external destinations and some of those things. I'm going to probably come back to this because what I want to show is what actually we did just a minute ago. So let me pull here, and just to make it easier so everyone's not, I'm going to look for Cerberus. So here's my machine. Remember that really cool host name I came up with, SE Malware Demo? Here's the name of the machine. And here's some of the different times that I've run this. So if we look, let's look at this guy right here. So let's see what Cerberus did. So there's a bunch of different things, right? And this is where we start to get into some of the threat analysts looking at these, and it gets detailed, and it might be an eye chart. I'll see if I can zoom in. So what it's doing here, it's doing a bunch of creates. So it's basically trying to spawn itself multiple times to hide itself. Very, very common with ransomware. So it's stuff that we're looking at. And in general, it's not necessarily bad up until step 7. So this is our automated analysis. This is what we looked at on what just happened on that VM where I double-clicked on that ransomware. And so what it did was it tried to use unmapped memory. Basically what we'd call a process hollow or try to jump outside of memory. And that's a common way that viruses, or malware tries to hide itself, ransomware tries to hide itself so that it can execute. Traditional antiviruses will go, oh, okay, you're using different memory. It won't care. An EDR solution will go, whoa, time out. I said use that room and you're in that room. That's not right. No, you violated a rule of how operating systems work. And so because we're looking at how the operating system is supposed to interact, or I should say how the applications are supposed to interact with the operating system, and they violate rules, it's how we catch 0 days. Because so far, there's only so many, you've got a finite amount of rules in an operating system on how memory executes and all these things. But if we're blocking that and looking for those things, it's very easy for us to detect it and then block those things. So what it tried to do was, if it'll drag over, for those that are Windows admins in the room, oh, come on. It actually tried to access WMI services on my Windows machine. So it's trying to pull information off that machine. So it's probably trying to figure out, okay, who's on it, details of it. So again, very suspicious, because why would a user application do that? User application shouldn't be accessing components of Windows. They should be running in memory space that we told it to, and it shouldn't be trying to do these things. Now, one of the other things that it did is what we call a file write access. So very similar, right? We see all the different times it tries to hide itself, and then right here at the end, it tries to dump its payload, meaning it tries to do a process hollow. If I keep zooming in here in step 7 and step 8. So this is, again, a process hollow is part of the MITRE attack framework. For those who are familiar with MITRE, I'll show you kind of where that is. But what we see is it also tried to write to a file, and it tried to do encryption, because we're looking for encryption. We have a kernel level driver in there that's always looking for things to hit it. And so ironically enough, the file that it tried to encrypt, if I can zoom in, I don't know why it's not playing nice today. Let's see. So that file, man, all right, well, it's not going to play nice. The file that it tried to encrypt is called malware.7zip. Ironically, it's the password protected file where I keep all my malware. So I ran ransomware, and it just found the first file, and it said, oh, it's malware.7zip, and it tried to encrypt that file. And the FortiEDR said, no, you're not, you can't encrypt. So we can look at those things from a binary standpoint and the way that files get executed, so we can tell the difference between BitLocker and valid encryption, things that maybe come from your password manager, because the way they interact with the operating system versus new ransomware.exe, we're going to look at that and go, absolutely not. Now, there are chances where we get false positives, but then we can always build what we call exceptions. So if you said, oh no, this is a homegrown application, you guys have never seen that before, that's why it looked weird. Okay, that's fine. Then we allow homegrown.exe, you're allowed to do these things. We check the box once, we say allow this, and then it's done from an administration standpoint. But this is really where we're blocking those things and allowing those to happen. Now, what you notice, if I can zoom in here, or maybe not, man, Chrome is not playing nice. So right here is, it says malicious threat is unknown. But earlier, I mentioned that Cerber is a really well-known threat. Well, Cerber does dynamic code injection, so it's always rotating code. And then I'm changing hashes. I'm always manipulating the code to basically create as close to a 0 day as I can. I'm good. I'm not a 0 day threat researcher. So this is a perfect example of something that was totally unknown by Fortinet. As large as our database is and all of our information, totally unknown to Fortinet. But its behavior was suspicious. Right? The things that it did were suspicious, and so then we're going to go ahead and we're going to block it. And if we want to, for the hardcore cyber people in the room, if you wanted to go dive down into some of the stuff, we also give you down here what we call process hollowing. So that's, again, a MITRE attack framework. It's not something that Fortinet invented. It's industry standard on how applications execute in an operating system. We have entire ways of doing that, or entire links to what those techniques are in MITRE. So if you're like, hey, what the heck is process doppelganging? You can click on that link and go read up from MITRE on what process doppelganging is. So the other thing we see too here that my good friend Cerberer did, again, same thing, right? It's trying to execute outside of memory space. It connected to a command and control IP address, that 178.33 address. So that means what it's usually trying to do is go out and say, hey, I have a victim. Here's the information for that victim, right? Because it tried to pull the WMI, all the details of the machine, maybe your company name, because it can pull all that information right out of the machine and then dump that to the cyber criminals who will then go, okay, we'll wait for our ransomware payment and then we'll give you the passwords. So we stop those things. And one of the cool things that we can stop is we can stop that not only on the actual endpoint, meaning the laptop or server sitting in a cloud, sitting in your data center, but we can also take that IP address and then send that to a Fortinet firewall, even a third-party firewall, anything out there that we want to be able to block those things from happening at the edge of your network. So again, another way to protect your environments. So this is what Cerberer did. These are all the things. There's a lot more to it. I'll skip all the extra gory details. And let's talk about, if you remember when I did the ransomware, it automatically deleted itself. Well, how did that happen? That wasn't Cerberer doing that. That was FortiEDR doing that. And how does that look for everyone? Should I zoom in? I'm seeing some head shakes. Okay. So this is automated incident response, meaning what you saw was we detected something bad, we looked at it, we stopped it from executing, and then you go, well, what's the next step? Well, we can just hold it there and kind of block it, stop it from executing, or what we can do, and it's based on the classification, so that was classified as ransomware. It's definitely malicious, or it could be suspicious depending on the behavior we see. And so what we can do then, under remediation, I'll have to scroll a little bit, is remediate. I can terminate the process. I can delete the file, as you saw. I can clean persistent memory, and then I can take an action to block that in my network somewhere. So that's one of the nice things is now I've stopped it from running, I've cleaned it out of memory, and if I want to, it's optional, right? It's literally a checkbox. I can then have it delete the file. Depending on if I have a SOC team or if I have a managed team, maybe I don't want to delete the file. I just want FortiEDR to kind of hold it in that space to stop it from executing. I can do that, and then through the console, I can even have it pull information back. I can have it say, hey, I want to take that file and pull it off that machine and send it to a threat research team. We can do that as well. So you don't have to delete the file if you don't want. But the important part is that happened in near real time, right? We clicked on the file, it ran, we blocked it, and then FortiEDR said, Cerberer.exe, delete. So that whole thing took exactly 0 human interaction. So obviously in here, if I scroll up, we can do things like, send an email. So maybe I want to send it to, soc@mycompany.com. Well, okay, hey, Jason's machine just got hit with Cerberer. Let's give him a call and see what's going on. I can obviously have it send, I don't have it configured right now, but I could have it send to a SIM via syslog. I can even open a ticket. So if the standard IT operation is to open a ticket in ServiceNow, we can automatically open a ticket. So you have tracking of the incident and everything is recorded, especially with some of the new legislation that's come down from the federal government about in the SEC on how long you have to report time between reporting an incident when you know that it happens. If you open a ticket, now there's a log of it, it's tracked, everything is good. So that's the playbook, that's the automation, that's the piece where, again, we stop that from happening. We can stop it in real time. I can do other things like investigation. So maybe this is kind of a bigger use case in the office, but I could even isolate my device. So meaning, hey, if I've got a whole bunch of people in an office still or a hybrid office, maybe I just want to take Jason's machine and just knock it off the network. So I can isolate it from the network as well if I want to. So this way, if there is something nasty on my machine, it's an extra step because we'll stop Cerberer if it's a worm which there is a worm component to Cerberus, will stop it from kind of spreading in your network sort of laterally. But you may want to take that extra step of going, man, if Jason got Cerberus on his machine, what other bad stuff is he clicking on? Okay, just take him off the network, right? Maybe this is not a sophisticated user. Maybe Jason needs a Chromebook instead of a Windows machine, something that has less of an attack surface. So we can isolate that. We have a number of different custom actions we can do too. So usually at some point, someone in a conversation with customers will ask, hey, I have a Cisco solution. I've got a Juniper solution. Could you interact with it? And my answer is yes. Yeah, if it has an API, some sort of that we can call, there's a custom action template in here too that we can say, hey, go tell the Cisco NAC solution, go tell Cisco ICE, here's the MAC address, knock this thing off the network, move it into an isolation VLAN. If it's in AWS, if you have workloads running in AWS, Azure, Google, you name it, we can do the same thing. We can go, hey, web server 1 just got hit with a looked like a log4j attack, and it executed on the machine. I thought we were patched on log4j. Apparently we're not, but we've still stopped that from happening. And then we could take an action in the public cloud as well, like move it to a different, VPC, whatever the cloud infrastructure is, move it to, the equivalent of a VLAN in the cloud. So we've got a lot of different options there. The last thing, which I'm just going to really touch on very high level, just because I'm not sure if there's any fellow threat nerds in the room, but we also have threat hunting. So threat hunting is sort of like, hey, you walk into a warehouse full of needles and there's stacks of needles everywhere, and you're like, well, I'm looking for a needle that's a little bit brown but a little bit green. How do I find that? That's essentially the analogy I use. That's what threat hunting can do for us. So threat hunting could do something as pretty cool as, why don't you once a week scan my endpoint machines to make sure that my users aren't putting passwords.txt on the desktop or anywhere in the files, because we've seen that too. It's the modern version. People are laughing. I know it's silly, but it's no different than if you put, the sticky note of the password on the other side of your laptop or under your keyboard. We have seen people passwords or my passwords. So you can even have the solution go out. I don't recommend doing it like every 15 minutes because that's just too much, but do it once a week, do it once a month. Have the solution, this is an example, but I can do all kinds of other things. Like I could look for Cerberus. Hey, Jason just got hit with Cerberus because he ran it. Could you go tell me if any other machines in my environment have this file called Cerberus.exe? And you can ask the threat hunting module to go out and scan all your environments and go, yep, you got Cerberus.exe on Bill's machine. Sorry, anyone named Bill in the room. Then you can go and, again, have that whole holistic view. This is sort of where it really gets into the, almost like into the matrix, down the rabbit hole. There's a lot you can do with this. But the automation is what we've tried to make simple, as opposed to the threat hunting we're working on some automation there. It just takes time, but threat hunting is very, very powerful. You can do some pretty cool stuff with it. And I think we got about 6 minutes left. I got the 10 minutes a few minutes ago. Are there any questions that I can answer or anything? I wanted to leave at least 5 or 6 minutes at the end for any questions, go back over anything. Crypto lock another VM, or actually didn't get crypto lock, but blow something else up. I know it's kind of sort of people see that and they're like, didn't do anything. I'm like, exactly, right? You don't want that crypto lock splash page. But let's, go through that. So, when you actually detonate ransomware properly in a safe way, people are like, that's all it did? And I'm like, well, what would you like it to do? Would you like it to crypto lock my VM? I mean, I can revert to my snapshot, but any questions at all about anything, integrations, anything at all? Good question. Yeah, so this is completely web-based. So this console you're seeing sits in the cloud, in Google Cloud. The machine that I have is sitting in a on-prem data center in a VM environment, but the actual infrastructure itself all lives in the cloud. That was the question. And actually that brings up go ahead. Yep, the agent's running on the endpoint, and then that's connecting to the cloud. Now, the nice thing about that, kind of related to both questions, is like I live in Phoenix, so I'm going to go home this evening, and I could, if I had it running Cerber on my physical laptop, I could double-click Cerber while I'm on the plane home. And let's say we've never seen it before, but again, it violated the rules, but I don't have internet access, right? I'm on a plane, and let's say I didn't pay for the $20 Wi-Fi, which usually I don't pay for the $20 Wi-Fi, but that's not worth it. But let's say I have no Wi-Fi, which is usually the case, then we'll still block it. We'll still go, this looks suspicious. So even if you have people kind of coming online, offline to the internet, we're still going to protect them even without the cloud. Now, there's no way for me to then obviously call the help desk and say, hey, unblock Cerber. I mean, I'm on a plane anyways. But there's no way to manage the device. But as soon as it comes back online, we'd see it in the console. And then we'd go, oh, this happened an hour ago. And we could go build an exception if we needed to, if it was valid. Other questions? Yep. Yes. Yep. Yeah, and actually one of the demos that I do, relies on remote shell. I just wasn't sure how the internet was here. So the remote shell is pretty cool, where you just go by and what's called a drive-by. So let's say, my friend Bill sends me a link and I'm like, cool, thanks, Bill. Let me check this out. But it's not Bill. But it's sent from my friend Bill. And I go and I click the link. And even if it doesn't do, we call it a drive-by or like a fileless attack, where it's not even downloading anything to my machine. I have a demo that is 100% relies on the internet, and I just was worried about how it would work in here. But that same thing, we'll see a remote shell on the machine and block that automatically. So kind of again, we call that a drive-by because you click the link and then, or we even have one of the guys had a really fancy one where you click the valid link. And then in that valid link, they poisoned the website with an invalid link. And when you click that invalid link, even though you're like, hey, I'm going down the right path, and then this little sort of speed bump, we detect that as well. So some of our threat guys have built some pretty fancy ways of tricking human beings into doing things and then showing that EDR, even though you said do this, we're going to go, that's not a good thing. Yep, back there. It does actually, and actually that's kind of what you're seeing here. So I'm logged in. These are actually our tenants. This is a demo environment, but here's some of the environments that I have. JG, Hill Valley, for anybody that's a Back to the Future fan. One of the guys is a huge Back to the Future nerd, so he calls all of his stuff Hill Valley and Back to the Future things. But yeah, we absolutely support multi-tenancy. A lot of MSSPs actually purchase our product, FortiEDR, to then manage for their customers because it is multi-tenant. How are we on time? Like 1 minute, according to my fancy smartwatch. Anything else? Cool. Well, thanks everyone for your time. I appreciate it.